In this video, we're going to talk about 4 coaching techniques that will increase your impact as a coach. And the best way to increase your business is to increase your impact as a coach. In other words, the better you are as a coach, the better your business will be. But these techniques are not what most coaches are searching for, and it's not what most people can even see or pay attention to. So take a listen to this whole video, and when you implement these 4 things, your impact as a coach, your confidence and your certainty is going to go through the roof, as will your clientele. Let's talk about the 4 coaching techniques to create more impact for your clients. And what's critical about that statement is, I think, the word impact. I think that's the biggest intention for us as coaches, is we want impact for our clients. And a lot of times it's easy for us as coaches to do the things that might make it easier for us or impress our clients or satisfy some other version or some other desire rather of our ego. But if you want impact for your clients, if you want clients that are independent rather than dependent, then you really have to employ these 4 techniques. And it's all client driven rather than coach driven or curriculum driven. I mean, the coach is leading, we are facilitating and guiding, but we're guiding according to what's going on with the client. And I think that's a really important shift of awareness that a lot of people don't have. I've been doing this for a long, long time, as you know, 15 plus years. I know you've been doing this for a long, long time. And so this discussion is really about what we've learned over the years of doing this work. This isn't just theory.
Right.
So we're going to give you these 4 techniques. They can all be employed. I think I've used the word employed twice now, in like, what, 4 minutes? I don't know how I feel about that, but we can use these are not difficult skills. We can all do this stuff, but it takes intention and it takes practice. So it's not a flip of a switch that everybody will just start catching all the things that we're going to explain and, invite you to start catching and so forth. So take it easy on yourself as you're learning this, and just implement a few at a time, and you'll just get better and better and better. So the first one is to pay attention to their language. We could probably do a whole seminar for days and days and days on language. Language is so critical. It's obviously the way that we communicate, and we generally do it unconsciously, though. I think that's the key thing. I don't know how many times it's happened to me. I know it's happened to you. It happens to pretty much all of us, where somebody will ask us what we just said and we forget, or somebody will tell us what we just said. And sometimes we can almost viciously deny that we just said that, and then watch a video and it's exactly what we just said. It's because we generally communicate unconsciously. We don't have a very high filter for the words that come out of our mouths a lot. And because of that, from a coaching standpoint, somebody's language is the best thing to look at and listen to. Might sound weird to say look at their language, but there is a way to look at the language. We'll get into that later on, because it's a direct line to their belief system. It's a direct line to the perspectives that they have about the world. So the language is full of clues, full of flags, right? Like, hey, pay attention to this, and ask me this, and ask me about my grandmother. And there's so much intelligence for us to pick up as coaches with people's language, but most of us just aren't trained for what to look for, because we're not conscious of our own language, and we don't really understand how language is attached to the inner workings of the human and what it is attached to. So from a coaching standpoint, if you know what to look for, then you'll be able to dive in, you'll be able to catch this stuff, and you'll be a better coach, right? So before we jump in, is there anything you want to add to whatever I've said so far? And you have to use the word employ.
Perfect. So first, I love that you said that these are tested, impactful techniques, and they're tested not only as a coach, they're tested as a client. Right? When I was looking over like the outline, right, of this content and these 4 techniques that are so powerful, I have experienced them in the client seat as well. So they absolutely are transformational and impactful when employed properly by the coach.
Not bad.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty good.
And then with language, one of the coolest things that we can learn how to do when we get really good at this is we can learn to listen not only to what is being said, but we can learn to listen and see what's not being said. This, like you said, I thought you were going to say one video. I'm happy you said seminar, because language is everything. It's everything. It's aligned to not just our beliefs, but our emotions. Right? There's been so many times that I've said one thing, but or thought that I was saying one thing, but the words coming out of my mouth, let whoever I was talking to know that I was not done, that I was upset, no matter what I was actually saying. When somebody knows how to listen, like there's so much that can be, being expressed through the words that we're speaking or not speaking.
Maybe you have to tell me some of those stories of those times when you've said one thing and meant another, or your face or body told a different story. That was a joke for any of you that don't understand our relationship. Yeah. So I've been there at many of those moments that you talk to. And of course I do the same thing. And what you said about listening to what's not being said is critical as a coach. And I think we have to understand what to look for so that we understand the distinctions, what to distinguish, what to throw away, what to dive into, so that we can get a full experience of the language. And then we can dive into what's not being said, or is this word actually matching the body language, or is it matching the story? Like a lot of times people will say things, but their emotions or their body language or their tonality doesn't match what they're talking about. So maybe they're talking about their goals and their dreams and being all excited, but they're talking as though they're in grief, or they're talking about somebody who died, but they're not connected to any kind of human emotion that would make sense when talking about somebody who has died. So that's what we're looking for, is the things that are misaligned and stuff that's being said, stuff that's not being said, how is it being said, etc. So let's start with some of the things that's actually being said, some of the words. So there are 8 primary ways that we're going to talk about here that we disempower ourselves just as humans. These are common language patterns that we use. The first one I call resistance triggers. And there are 3 phrases, words or phrases that we use a lot that produce resistance. And those words are should, need to, and have to. Anytime we hear the word should, or we use the word should, or need to, or have to, it generally produces resistance. So if I tell you, you should really look like this, or do this, or choose, this career in your life, or you need to blah, 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 or you really have to, there's an element of resistance that gets triggered in almost all of us. And then some of us, it's a high level of resistance. For me,
I was
if
like,
anybody tells me,
I said, by some of us, you mean?
I'm the president of that club. If anybody tells me what I need to do, as soon as they've stopped saying the phrase, you need to, I've decided I'm not doing whatever it is they're going to say. And that's not a good thing, because a lot of times it's a form of sabotage, because what they're telling me I should do or have to do is actually true. But I've just got such a high level of resistance, not as much anymore because I'm aware of this, but it's just, it's embedded in me. And so as a coach, we want to make sure as much as possible that we're not telling our clients what they need to do. or what they should do and what they have to do, because it will immediately trigger resistance in a lot of people. Not everybody, but if you don't need to use the words, which you don't, then it's better that you don't use resistance triggers just in case. So if you have somebody that wouldn't be triggered by these words, you won't do any harm by not using them. But if you have somebody that is triggered, especially if they don't recognize they're triggered, and you tell somebody what they should do, then we might, as the coach or as the leader, be embedding the resistance
Oh,
when actually it's the solution. It's the thing that they do need to do, but we just have to position it in a different way so that it doesn't elicit that resistance. And it happens with us internally too. So a lot of times we do this all the time with our clients. A lot of times we listen to the language and they'll say things like, I really need to do this, and I should be doing this, and I have to do this. So a lot of times we will resist our own language internally just because of the energy on these words.
yeah.
Anything to add? You should really add something.
Awesome. Yeah, they're also indicators of likely of guilt or shame or pressure that's being put on a client. So if I have somebody that I'm listening to and they're using those words, those are possible conversations to dive a little bit more deeply into.
Yeah, they're very judgy words.
Yeah.
Should, need to, have to. It's those are great to follow up with says who, or some version of according to who. The second thing here is the word you.
Oh, yeah.
The way that we use the word you quite often is something to explore. So for example, somebody might say, you know how when you get cut off in traffic and it just pisses you off, or you just lose all control? We tend to use the word you in cases like that as though it's what everybody does, as like it's a universal human law. And if something is a universal human law, we can't change it. When people are using the word you in that capacity, we as coaches, we have to, even though I just mentioned the words have to as a resistance trigger. But in this case, it's true. We absolutely, if you want impact for your client, we invite you to. It's actually hard to use some of these words that are so embedded and so common. But if you want to provide impact for your client, then we got to get them to see that there's no personal control or personal choice in the way that we use that word in this universal context like that. So we're always wanting them to say, I choose this, or when this happens, I get angry, rather than you get angry, because then we're kind of hiding our responsibility in that.
Huge.
So it's not the word you by itself, it's the way it's used.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time I would say it's a protection of
Mm-hmm.
some kind. All right, the third one is the phrase I am. There's a reason that most people that teach affirmations teach to use the words I am in your affirmations. So I am happy, I am unfolding in my journey as a human, I am peace and love. It's because I am is an identifying phrase.
Mm-hmm.
It basically means I equal. It's like an equal sign. So I am happy is like I equal happy. But the way that, so that's all fine and good when it comes to affirmations and when the words are intentional. And so often we use those words as emotional attachers, but they're just not intentional. So if we say I am angry,
Mm-hmm.
what we're saying is I equal angry. And that's not actually true. But if I equal something, then I can't make a choice to put that thing down if my own language is saying I am that thing.
Right.
So I am lazy, I am overwhelmed, I am angry. All of those create emotional attachment to the thing that we actually want to change.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to shift that language to almost anything else. You know, it could be, I'm creating anger right now, or I'm experiencing overwhelm.
Right.
Some version that pulls us away from the emotional attachment to it, because then it restores our choice and responsibility. I think that'll be a theme in most of these, especially language. It's restoring choice and responsibility.
Yeah, through ownership. I mean,
Hmm.
when I use that phrase "I am" in this way that is more disempowering, it's a complete identifier. So I'm like taking on the identity of this thing, which leaves very little room, right, for change from like from the perspective that I'm sitting in. It feels like it's me entirely, like it's taking up all of me. Versus if I'm just experiencing grief, or I'm experiencing anger or irritation, or I'm expressing these things right now, then it just feels like it's something that is flowing through me, something that might be a part of me, something that that the identity of me is sitting in, but it's not me in its wholeness. And that's so important.
Yeah, that's a really important piece, so that we separate who we are
Right.
from what we are experiencing. The fourth one here is often used with the I am that we just talked about. And it's ED words, like I am overwhelmed, I am frustrated. That also removes our ownership, and and we attach to this the feeling or the condition as though it's so big that, again, we can't really do anything about it. So if we hear a client go, wow, you know, I'm just really overwhelmed. All right, well, it sounds like something is overwhelming you, which means something is more important, or more powerful rather, than you.
Mm,
And even when that could potentially be true in certain circumstances, I'd say most of the time, the way we use these ED words so commonly, it's not true. But the whole key is, again, restoring ownership, responsibility, and control. So what we do as coaches is we give our clients the control back by switching the ED word to an ING word, and then put how we're doing that. So if client says, I'm really frustrated right now, we would say, how are you frustrating yourself? And then if the client says, first of all, the clients don't always like that. I'm remembering probably moments of our coaching journey together just a few short years ago. Uh, the clients might not like that, because when we're in these negative states, or when we're huffing and puffing, and when we're blaming, and when we're justifying and all that, one thing that we don't tend to like is responsibility.
yeah.
We don't tend to like it being put in our face that actually we're doing this to ourselves, right? So sometimes we got to offer this to the client with some gentleness. But the truth is, we control our experiences. And
Yeah.
so we want the client to understand that they are overwhelming themselves by doing something. So, how are you overwhelming yourself? And so the client might say something like, I'm overwhelming myself by focusing on all the things that I have to do today, and all the things that I didn't get done yesterday. All right, great. So, number one, you're doing it, and anything you're doing, you can stop doing. But that phrase also tells you how to stop doing it. So, if you're overwhelming yourself by looking at all the things that you have to do, well, then don't look at all the things you have to do. Just look at maybe three of them, and then focus on that, or maybe just one, or all the things that you didn't get done yesterday. Well, you can't go back to yesterday and do anything. So then how about we not look at the things that you didn't get done yesterday? So when we take ownership in our language, quite often the solutions of what we need to do to stop whatever the state is that we want to move out of, those solutions are in the language just naturally.
Mhm. Which is why we resist it, so we can stay stuck and blame other people.
So much easier to just blame other people.
Yeah, we think so.
So, what do you mean by that? You want to
Yeah, because I mean,
unpack that a little bit?
yeah, it feels easier temporarily, right? It feels easier because if for so for me on my journey, responsibility meant fault. Responsibility meant like blame, it didn't mean ownership, right? It meant like that I had done something wrong. So
Right.
they agree. So for I resisted taking that responsibility because I didn't want to be like to experience the punishment of sitting in that ownership. So it was easier and safer for me to blame everybody else in my life or in the world
Right.
because then it was their fault. But so it protected me sort of, but it didn't give me any opportunity to change because they weren't actually the problem. So they didn't have the power to be the solution. So I was just staying in the place of being a victim, waiting for like to be saved by somebody who didn't even have the power to do that. So it was like a short term, oh, I'm safe from, blaming myself, but long term I stayed like in this victim place.
Yeah. So that short-term feeling of power or control, or like we avoided something, generally creates the disempowerment. That's why the title of this is Ways We Disempower Ourselves. And usually it's not conscious, but we're taking our ownership away. And empowerment is a bitter pill to swallow a lot of times. So
Yeah.
it does feel easier to avoid and blame and shame, but it truly isn't in the long term. The fifth thing here is the distinction between the words why and how, especially when we're stuck on some kind of issue in some sort of relationship. What causes most humans to be stuck is some why question,
Mm,
generally.
yeah.
Why did I do that? Why didn't I see it? Why won't they change? Why do they always do this? It's some version of why. The problem with that question is that very rarely are we able to do anything about the question we're asking. Or if we get an answer to that question, will we like the answer?
Right.
Or will the answer be helpful to us? So if we say things like, why do I always get scared when it comes time to share my message? You got to be careful about asking those kinds of questions, because the brain is fantastic at asking whatever questions you pose to it. That's why for most of us, we need to change the quality of our questions for us to change the quality of our answers.
Woo.
Most of us are not getting the answers that we're looking for because we're not asking the right questions. Or we are getting the answers that we're looking for, but they're not doing anything to change our results because the questions are wrong. So when you ask your mind, why do I always get scared when it comes time to share my message? Your brain will answer that question. And the answers are not going to be very fun. They're not going to be very loving. Essentially, the questions that we're asking ourselves is, why do I suck? Why am I a loser? Why do I fail? Why is life unfair? Right? Underneath all the questions, it's that energy. And so when you ask questions like, why am I a loser? Your brain's going to come up with things like, well, because you've always been a loser, or because you didn't have the right parents and you didn't have the right upbringing and you don't have what it takes and you'll never succeed. The answers to those questions just shut us down even further,
Right.
and they don't provide any movement.
Mm-mm.
So when we ask how questions, we don't plug into why are we losers? We
Mm.
plug into how can we change our scenario? How can we change, or how can we improve in what we want to do? So a simple shift could be, why do I always have a panic attack when my brother comes around? And that question can be, how can I control my breathing when my brother comes around? Just the shift in that question is night and day, because now your brain will answer, how can I control my breathing, rather than why do I always have a panic attack? And then we just embed the fact that we're always going to have panic attacks.
Yeah, it's solution focused versus problem focused. Mhm.
Exactly. And it doesn't even, like, there's no hint that we even want it to change. So if I say, why do I always have a panic attack? It doesn't sound like I don't want to. And it doesn't sound like I want anything different, because whatever that different is hasn't been identified. So that's a really important way to put it, is that now we're focused on solutions. And it'll usually give us something to do rather than ruminate on why we suck so much.
Right.
The next one, number 6, similar distinction here between a couple important words, the difference between can't and won't. We just have the word can't embedded in our language so much.
Yeah.
And most of the time when we use the word can't, we're lying. Like, oh, I can't make it to your birthday party, or I can't lose any weight, or I can't get any clients. No, those are all false. Those are not actually true statements,
Yeah.
but they hide our responsibility, therefore disempower us when we use them, because can't is a shut down word. It's like, oh, we're just noticing what we can't do. Doesn't even
Yeah.
sound like you want to do it. It's
Right.
just, oh, I just can't do this. So can't is a condition. It's a statement around a condition that makes us feel powerless because it's something that we want to change, but we can't change. When we change that word to won't is a decision. So what we say a lot is can't is a condition, won't is a decision. And the beautiful thing about that, which is irritating, is that it restores ownership and choice. So if we say, I won't lose those last 10 pounds, I
Mhm.
won't get any clients, I won't go to bed earlier, I won't create more connection in my relationship. It just hits us a different way, but it provides the ability to change that choice and actually create whatever experience that we would rather have instead. So it's another bitter pill to swallow, but in restoring that responsibility, not fault and blame like you were speaking to, but in
Right.
restoring that responsibility actually gives us the empowerment to change.
Yeah. So good. It just puts the focus on the actual issue. I mean, instead of creating this illusion or mirage to kind of blur out what the real situation is, if I take ownership and I say I won't go to bed early, now we have the target in the right place, and we can actually talk about what's really going on.
Man, but we hate that so much.
No, yeah,
We generally do not like, we as humans generally do not enjoy
no,
the illumination of our self-sabotage.
yeah,
There, even the way you just said that, yeah, there was like compassion in that, but judgment and sadness and truth, like all wrapped up into kind of a collective bless our hearts,
yeah.
the way we do things. But it's exciting to know, hopefully, that we can actually change.
Absolutely. When we know that, we can deliver it as a coach, right? We're not just coming at our clients, machine gunning all of these things at them inside of a session. Because I have that energy in me because I remember the moments, which helps to deliver these things with compassion, ask the questions, shift the focus and the language, but do it with love and connection, because I do understand that the holding up of the mirror to look at self and take ownership and responsibility is ultimately empowering. And if we've been blaming for most of our lives, right, it's not going to feel good or easy.
Right. But it's the only way out. The 7th one here is negative affirmations. So when people say things like, I can't win, life isn't fair, it never lasts, he always does this, she always does that, I always fail myself, I can't choose the right person, we are affirming with certainty the things that we want to change. But our language isn't providing any room for change when we say things like it never lasts. So if I'm in control of your motivation, I'm the internal entity for your motivation. I'm the one that gives us the fuel to get out of bed and whatever it is that we're wanting to do, whether it's go to the gym or take a shot, at whatever it is in business or whatever, make outreaches to potential clients, what have you. If I'm that entity for motivation, and I hear you say, it doesn't matter. It just never lasts anyway. Nobody has any money. I can never get any clients. Well, why would I keep trying to motivate us if you're telling me essentially it doesn't matter?
No
Why
point.
try?
Yeah.
Because it never works out. And underneath these negative affirmations is usually some form of ego protection based
Mhm.
on our past
Yeah.
or self-soothing, making ourselves feel okay or resigned to what has happened with these universal, that's just the way life is kind of statements. But most of us don't recognize that in doing that, we actually shut down our internal drive to keep going and to take
Mm.
more chances or to believe that anything different than what we always experienced in the past is possible to change. So these negative affirmations will really shut down effort and hope and belief
Mm.
and inspiration. And if they get shut down from the inside, then does it really matter if I know what to do, but I continue to shut myself down with it doesn't matter what you do because it never lasts. You can't trust people.
Yeah. It's a real fast way to stop trying.
And it's a justification. So it actually, if we take a look at it, like if it never lasts, then it kind of makes sense to not try.
Sure.
Like if we have this belief that it doesn't matter what hill we climb up,
Mhm.
we're going to fall down and get hurt.
Yep.
Okay, well then it makes sense to stop climbing hills.
Mhm.
So it actually gives this like intellectual illusion of intelligence to not try.
Yeah.
Because now we're being smart. I mean, if it always doesn't work out, then it's better to not risk. And
Mm.
that's one of the reasons why so many of us talk ourselves out of our dreams, like as soon as we have them. All right. Well, that landed pretty heavily. On that note, let's finish this with number 8 here is universal words.
Mm.
And these we've just naturally used a lot of these in the explanations because a lot of this stuff overlaps onto each other. You might use 3 or 4 of these things at the same time. But universal words like always, never, every single time, everybody, nobody,
Yeah.
those also don't provide any possibility for change. So if all the good guys are taken, okay, well then just stop.
Right.
If nobody has any money, uh, okay, then why try? Again, it's a self-soothing mechanism, I think, for us to take responsibility away because we don't want to think that there actually are people who have money. We're just not doing what it takes to go get them.
Woo!
Yeah, I'd rather not have that. I'd rather believe that nobody has money.
That's right. Yeah. To something you said earlier, they're most of the time they're lies. Like they're just not true. Yeah.
Universals are always wrong.
Always wrong. When employed by clients.
Yes. So these are the 8 ways that we commonly disempower ourselves. So as a coach, we want to be listening to this acutely. We really want to pay attention to language. And one of the ways that we tend to use our language is we take what we've experienced from our past and we use our language to basically cement it in the future. So one of the concepts that's I think really important in terms of empowerment is don't use your language to describe your past, use it to prescribe your future. So if you want a different future, then make sure your language has the capacity
Mm.
for your past to change into what you want in the future. And the reality is most people's doesn't. the language is so cemented in the past that the future really can't shift by the things that they say. So as a coach, we're constantly wanting to look at people's language and pay attention to all of these, all these 8 things that we're talking about, but anything else that you can just notice about how they're saying things as well. So these next 3 skills that we're going to talk about, these techniques to create more impact for your clients, are based on our connection to, maybe not based on, but they will allow us to see people's language even more, right? And so these are going to be a little bit quicker, and these are more energetic, right? It's not necessarily just listening to what other people are saying, but we want to watch them. And at the beginning of this video, I think we both kind of alluded to looking at what people say. So the second thing, the second technique here is using sensory acuity. And what sensory acuity is deep focusing on your senses, not just your senses, but their senses as well. Anything that you can notice. It's just like this hyper awareness is essentially what sensory acuity is. And it's a master level skill. And I believe that there are a lot of coaches that know what to do or when to do it, but they don't have the sensory acuity to notice how or where, and what you do with one client isn't the same thing that you would do with another client, or what you did with one client yesterday might not be what you do with that same client today, or in the beginning of the call to the end of the call. There are so many things that can shift inside of a coaching relationship or inside of any kind of communication with humans, that we have to constantly be aware of what's going on. So we want to pay attention to people's body language. We want to pay attention to their skin tone, to the tightness in their facial muscles. We want to pay attention to where their eyes go when they talk. We want to pay attention to sometimes when they lean back or lean forward or slouch down or stand more upright. We want to pay attention to the cracks in their voice, the rhythm in their voice. A lot of times people will speed up and start talking really fast when they're excited about certain things or when they're nervous about certain things. And then they'll start to really slow down when they are afraid or they're just really more connected to what it is they're saying. And there's almost nothing that has inherent meaning in the things that we notice. So you might notice somebody speed up, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything good or bad, but you just notice that they just sped up. And us as coaches, we're just trying to pay as much attention as possible. And if you can see that people tend to speed up in like things that are connected, right? Like they tend to speed up when they're nervous about something. Then maybe later on in a different coaching session, you'll hear them start to speed up, and there's probably nerves underneath there because this human speeds up when they're nervous about something. But you can't notice that unless you've got your sensory acuity open. So we're paying attention to how humans communicate and what their bodies are doing while they're communicating, even more so than the words that they're saying, because the body is telling a different story than the mouth most of the time. And the story that the body is telling is usually the true story. The story that the mouth is telling is quite often not the true story. So when we can listen to the story from the mouth and the story from the body, and the story from the body is a lot more physical most of the time. So we're going to be paying attention to how this body is telling the stories out of its mouth. Then we'll get a full picture. And that's how we can listen for the things that are not being verbally said that you mentioned earlier, and get a much more 360-degree view of this human being in front of us.
Oh, I love that.
Anything you want to add to that?
And this is one of my very favorite skills. Yeah. I would just emphasize what you said, that the body tells a different story than the mouth. So that's where there's a lot of juice if we're paying attention. Yeah.
And this is something to just practice. Again, this isn't a flip of a switch that you're going to be able to pay attention to everything, but once you start watching how people communicate and what they're doing when they're not talking or when they are talking or while they're talking, and like, you alluded to this earlier, Michelle, when you were saying your body would be saying something and your mouth is saying something else, but your body is saying, actually, I'm not fine. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's as simple as somebody saying something and shaking their head no while they're saying it,
Right.
right? Like, yeah, I'm totally okay with what just happened. And their head is going, no, I'm not, right? Or their body slumps down or something like that. You can pay attention to people
Right.
changing the way they blink, the way they breathe, the way they shift, where they breathe, right? Like, are we breathing up in our chest, or are we breathing in our diaphragm, or our shoulders raised? There's so much information once you start looking for it. So just practice expanding your awareness more. And the more you practice it, the more it will expand. And within a relatively short period of time, I think you would agree with this, you can just kind of open up this awareness, and then you almost can't shut it down, right? Like, then you just notice everything.
Absolutely. And just to speak to that just briefly, not everything we don't call everything out. Just because we
Yeah,
know
that's a good
it
point.
doesn't mean that we like walk around with every person in our life or even every client and just call them out on every single movement that they made. Some things are just noticings for us to just capture and maybe hold on to for a later time.
And some things are significant and you will call it out. And I know this has happened for both of us, and I've seen it happen with other coaches, where you just listen to something. Maybe somebody has a crack in their voice when they
Mhm.
mention a certain person or a situation. And then later on, even at a different coaching session or later on in that communication, you could just say, like, so tell me about your brother. And then they'll just break down, or they'll get excited about something because their body was telling a different story and the coach listened and it was significant enough to bring it up later on. But sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, and that's part of the art of coaching. The third technique here is to be like a little child. Basically, ask curious questions. The majority of the solutions are in the client's head. They come from the client's awareness, the client's perspective, the client's past experiences, the client's knowledge, the client's analogies, the client's language.
Mm.
The amateur coach, and I'll say the less impactful coach, is one who answers somebody else's questions. The expert coach that leaves more of an impact is a coach that allows the client to answer their own questions
Mhm.
whenever possible. And usually it is possible. There are times when the client doesn't have certain information, and we will want to offer that information to them. But that's extremely rare, especially in transformational coaching, when you're
Mhm.
really diving in deep with people and exploring the things that are holding them back when it comes to sabotage and beliefs and internal conflicts. If you're talking about how to market, how to post on social media, how to set goals, then that's where we as the coach will bring a little bit more informational guidance, and we'll say, do this and then do this and then do this. But when we're talking about the internal game, if the challenge is inside the client's brain, inside their body, then the best coach is going to be one that facilitates them answering their own questions, them illuminating their own blind spots. But that's usually done through our curious questions as the coach. And
Mhm.
a sign of a really good coach is somebody who knows maybe what the client is going to say, or knows what the client needs to hear, but instead of saying it to the client, gets the client to say it to themselves. Because
Mhm.
whatever the client says is gospel.
Mhm.
Whatever we say can be denied or resisted or just not remembered later on. So if I tell you, when you get stressed out, just remember this, and I give you my solution to try to solve your stress, you're not going to remember that as easy as if I were to help you recognize that when you get stressed out, this is an image that comes to you from within, or a lesson that you learn from somebody else that's meaningful in your life, you're going to have access to that information more because it came from inside of you, rather than it coming from me and trying to put it on you and then trying to get you to remember it.
Right. I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about with language. It creates more empowerment, more personal choice, more ownership, which is so important.
Yeah, it's everything. And we did a whole video on this of is it the 29 questions one, I think? So we did a
Yeah.
whole video. We'll put a card up there and link to it in the description. 29 exploratory questions that you can use as a coach that'll shift your client into more solution mode. But here's the cool thing. It's so much easier as a coach to ask exploratory questions than to bring all of the answers to somebody else's question. That just induces stress and anxiety for the coach. So I'd rather your confidence and certainty be based more on your ability to be curious than your ability to answer questions.
Cool.
That's a good one.
That is.
And finally, the fourth technique here, it's wrapped into all the things that we're talking about, is to listen deeply.
Mm.
I call it transformational listening. Most of us just listen to do something. Like we listen to answer questions, or we listen to defend ourselves, or we listen to jump in. As a coach, a lot of times we're listening so that we can jump in and give a solution, right? Don't listen to solve, listen to understand. Really be in the essence of your curious listening. Because when we're in that space where we really truly are deeply listening, then a lot of the questions that we're going to ask actually just come natural to us. We don't have to remember this list of 29 questions when you watch that video. Most of those questions are going to be natural, or you will ask your version of that question rather than memorizing the exact questions and how to say them and when to say them. They'll come out of you naturally if you're curious and you're paying attention to the other person, but those are a result of you truly listening deeply. Because when we do that, most of the time, the clients will tell us where to go. The clients will tell us what to ask. The clients will give us clues that we wouldn't catch if we weren't listening deeply. And there's one more aspect of this that I think is really critical, and it's one of your biggest issues, concerns, desires. So I'm going to let you speak to it.
I heard issues.
But you saw me pause.
What's up with that?
As I was like, well, that's probably not the word I want to use. So I softened it up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I was actually messaging with a coach just yesterday about this. And I said, one of my only, like truly only non-negotiable qualities in a coach that I'm looking for, it's not about their skills. It's not about their exercises. It's, do I feel like heard, and do I feel understood? And do I feel like there is a safe space for me to express without judgment? And so when we as coaches are really deeply listening, we're giving our clients an experience that, if they're like most humans, they likely haven't felt that before. You know, a lot of us really don't feel that our voices are heard, that our opinions or thoughts or feelings matter, or that they're valid. And so when we give that, we create this container, this safe space for our clients where they really feel like we get them. And we're not doing it to jump in, to Sean's point, and try to fix them or answer their questions or be some kind of white knight that, you know, rides in as a you know, person with all the answers for them. It just helps them feel like valid, and that they're valid in what they are experiencing. And that is, I mean, that's just that's a human, like a core human desire, you know, to feel that like safety and being heard. And my gosh, when we can give that to them, then they will be, and this is not the reason to do it, but then they will be much more likely to engage with us, to show up for us, and to be in rapport so that we can coach them to the transformation that they're wanting to experience.
I didn't follow a lot of that because I wasn't paying attention. I was,
Beautiful. Nice. That's pretty on par. So I'm not surprised. That was funny. Mhm. Yeah, that was amazing. You a minute?
I might need a minute, yeah, to celebrate myself. Uh,
Mhm.
Kidding aside, validation is so critical for so many people, and oftentimes it's more than half of what we provide people is just
Yeah.
an ear to really listen. And it's sad sometimes to recognize that a lot of people don't have that. They don't have anybody that would listen and not immediately jump in or tell them that they're wrong or get them to try to change. And so a lot of this work requires there to be a feeling of validation and connectedness. And as you said in the beginning, safe space so that we can have the conversations that we really need to have inside of this work, especially as transformational coaches.
Additionally, we are not even able to. If we're trying to coach without deeply listening, then we're just trying to bring our solutions to their problem, to the thing that they're struggling with. So, in order to actually do our jobs, we do need to understand them and understand how they operate, how they think. I mean, that's exactly what we teach in our certification program, right? Like all of that work is so important before we even jump into the coaching.
And that's a good segue, certification program. So we'll put a card up here. We do teach the deep essence of human behavior, because if you don't understand humans and how we operate and how our brains work, then it's going to be really difficult for you to transform humans. So if you want to check out our certification program where we dive much deeper into that, there's a way for you to actually listen to the entire first module for free to see if it's a good fit for you. And for any of you that want to be coaches or want to just increase your capacity to coach at a deep level, then check out our breakthrough coaching certification course. And if you want more deep discussions like this that we just had here, it's really what we do in this channel so much, because it's the stuff underneath the stuff that really determines whether people succeed or not.
Yeah.
So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. We've got tons of playlists on our channel about all things that you could imagine are relevant in your coaching journey, no matter where you are as a coach. And if you want to support the channel or get into some of the higher levels of membership, then you can check out that by clicking the join button and see if you want to play at a little bit deeper level with us on this channel. Now, if you like this video, check out that video with the 29 coaching questions that you have to use if you want to be a better coach. The way we hold ourselves back is essentially with all the things that we've piled on top of ourselves, whether it's beliefs, identities, all the conflicts